Law enforcement is holding back a massive secret. And trust me when I say they have stumbled onto something absolutely massive. Pinning down the concrete proof is their biggest hurdle right now. But please note that every detail shared here originates from strictly verified experts. We are talking about federal operatives, profiling specialists, and retired police veterans who gave direct statements to Fox News, CNN, NBC News, and News Nation. Pointing fingers at uncharged people or dropping suspect names is strictly against our rules. Treating an ongoing federal probe with immense respect is our priority. So the concepts presented today are purely professional blueprints provided by specialists, rather than outright convictions. Picture Tucson, Arizona, at 2 in the morning, where an 84-year-old lady sits completely alone inside her residence. Nancy Guthrie lost her porch camera connection exactly at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, and no glitch occurred. The battery never died because an intruder physically removed the device, and then 25 minutes quietly slipped by. At 2:12 a.m., another backup motion detector picked up someone trespassing on her land. Without active recordings or cloud storage plans available, only a brief electronic signal proved that movement happened precisely at 2:12 a.m. Exactly 16 minutes later, at 2:28 a.m., the tracking application completely lost its link to her internal pacemaker. Nobody has laid eyes on the woman since that exact moment, establishing a concrete and terrifying sequence of undeniable facts. Yet the core focus of today revolves around a promised revelation for true crime followers. Because my upcoming breakdown will completely shatter your previous assumptions regarding those porch events. A federal profiling expert, a 25-year veteran who managed behavioral profiling for the Denver division over 13 years, recently proposed a fascinating concept ignoring the suspect's identity. Focusing entirely on the victim's perspective when her entryway unexpectedly swung open at midnight completely shifts the foundational logic behind this horrific tragedy. This particular hypothesis has occupied my thoughts for weeks. I absorbed every single psychological breakdown published publicly by heavily vetted professionals. Reviewing the federal video second by second inspired me to outline a compelling argument concerning victim recognition. Treating this away from wild internet rumors or baseless assumptions, we must view this through a professional psychological lens created by an investigator dedicating nearly 30 years to analyzing these exact criminal patterns. Sticking around until the finish will clarify the lack of federal arrests thus far and highlight their ultimate endgame, including the crucial detail that porch intruder completely overlooked when the situation instantly derailed. So let us examine the recordings. We should begin with the publicly released federal evidence. Exactly 10 days into probing on February 10th, Director Kash Patel uploaded porch surveillance online depicting a masked gunman lurking outside the victim's residence. Tech experts salvaged those clips via hidden background server trails. Despite the missing hardware and her totally inactive digital storage membership, federal authorities partnered alongside Google to extract those digital remnants deeply buried within the Nest infrastructure. Consider that reality for a moment. Since the thief genuinely assumed removing the lens would destroy all visual proof forever, grabbing the equipment off the wall meant taking it away or ditching the hardware in an undiscovered location to avoid detection. The intruder falsely believed all visual records vanished forever. Snatching those visual files from buried system remnants serves as an absolutely monumental chapter within this overarching investigative narrative today. Stealing the physical lens completely failed to erase the virtual storage space or the main processing network. The digital phantom containing those recorded moments remained safely untouched and quietly sleeping deep within the corporate system files, patiently waiting for authorized personnel alongside skilled tech allies to extract those frames, which ultimately provided the largest investigative breakthrough imaginable. Profilers instantly noticed terrifying psychological warning signs the second they observed those short recovered clips. Proceeding with caution remains essential here. Considering these clips capture far more than merely a disguised individual acting rather suspiciously, observers are witnessing a distinct psychological routine, and decoding those habits unlocks the terrifying reality of what occurred indoors later. The stroll itself immediately captured the attention of every seasoned professional reviewing those exact frames. The intruder displays absolutely zero fear or anxiety throughout his approach towards the property. Brianna Fox, a retired federal operative who currently teaches criminology in Florida and commands massive respect in psychological profiling circles, viewed the recording, and explicitly noted how the criminal casually strolled forward as if he proudly owned the damn place. Strolling remains crucial here because no guilty trespasser moves with such confident ease while committing midnight crimes. Such physical composure completely defies the typical anxious twitching expected from an unauthorized prowler lurking around unlawfully. He avoids paranoid shoulder checks or flinching violently whenever the night breeze creates random background noises. Instead of hugging walls to evade detection amid the desert foliage, he walks with shocking familiarity through the environment. The sheer, icy arrogance of his slow walk is utterly terrifying, bold enough to march straight up the main steps. Completely ignoring the shadowy side gates or rear entrances, expert Brianna Fox sharply highlighted his terrifying absence of fear regarding capture. Let us really zero in on that specific observation. Since a random intruder usually displays the exact reverse behavior during an offense, unknown assailants usually panic about getting busted, creating careless errors. Random intruders jump and paralyze in the glaring flash of security floodlights. Yet this guy carried a staggering aura of pure arrogance. As Fox noted, he acted absolutely certain he could just stroll away as effortlessly as he arrived on the property. Andrew McCabe, an ex-FBI deputy director and seasoned CNN consultant who stands among the highest-ranking voices discussing this mystery, came to the exact same deduction on his own. He characterized the suspect's advance as lacking any real anxiety. A pair of the nation's absolute top psychological profilers reviewed this exact tape and landed on an identical verdict. This intruder does not move like an unconnected predator. That fact alone should completely chill your blood, since some masked, armed random guy at 2 a.m. outside an 84-year-old lady's house does not simply amble around without a care. A random attacker runs on pure panic, practically drowning in stress hormones. They dart around frantically and anxiously, radiating the desperate energy of a doomed trespasser. Unknown thugs do not casually approach a porch at midnight as if running a daytime errand. This individual moved with absolute ownership. Now, the main psychological puzzle remains. The core mystery driving Johnny Grew's inquiries, and arguably the beating heart of the whole case, entirely revolves around his method of blinding the lens. Just observe his interaction with the security device. The man arrived totally unequipped. No focused beams to fry the sensor. No aerosol cans in hand. He lacked a sack to drape across the housing or any tool to kill the glare. Ex-federal investigator Josh Campbell, reporting on this mystery for the network, quickly pointed out that if this prowler had truly scouted the property beforehand and recognized the security system's major threat, he surely would have packed specialized gear to defeat it. Logically, previous files show perpetrators actively avoiding the transfer of DNA, dander, or bodily traces at the scene. Yet this guy ignored that protocol entirely. So what was his actual move? Initially, he lifts a covered palm to block the glass straight on. When that flops, he scans his surroundings, eventually dropping his gaze to the dirt. He spots the landscaping, rips a clump of leaves straight from the garden bed, and blindly mashes the foliage against the security hardware. He literally utilized a bush. Ex-federal supervisor Steve Moore, a regular analyst on various television panels for this story, labeled the act incredibly deliberate yet tragically uncoordinated. The seasoned veteran pushed even deeper. He noted that this guy had clearly never pulled off a stunt like this before. Let those contrasting concepts marinate together. Deeply calculated, yet completely made up on the fly. Those ideas can coexist perfectly. And here, they absolutely intersect. He possessed the foresight to realize the lens posed a risk, but lacked the tactical sense to pack a solution beforehand. The massive void separating awareness from readiness completely rules out an experienced underworld operator. Rather, it screams of an amateur who spent hours dreaming up a heist but lacks real-world reps in the field. A rookie who pumped his own adrenaline, mentally rehearsing the gig 100 times, only to panic and wing it at the first real physical hurdle. Furthermore, this specific detail regarding the security device stands out to me as profoundly telling and wildly ignored by many. The guy refrained from shattering or wrecking the tech. Masking it with greenery betrays a truly fascinating glimpse into his mindset. Bashing equipment shows pure fury and permanent commitment from a villain who embraces the absolute chaos of destroying a scene. Merely blocking the view, however awkwardly, suggests a culprit desperately clinging to the delusion of a flawlessly clean, spotless getaway. An offender stubbornly banking on a flawless victory. A man convinced in that split second his scheme remained perfectly untarnished. Christian Quinn, an ex-deputy commander for the Fairfax County Cops in Virginia, phrased it rather bluntly during his interview with network reporters. The underlying logic is severely flawed, and that brutal disconnect between drafting and executing will prove crucially important once we finally examine the terrifying threshold encounter. The weapon might just be a fake prop. Another glaring detail from the tape hooked basically every observing specialist, and we must absolutely dedicate proper focus to this point, since it fuels the core hypothesis of familiar, recognized identity. Let's discuss the firearm. The Prowler wields a piece that detectives visually classified as a small-frame autoloader, according to network sources. Weapons specialist Stephen Gowski noted its striking similarity to a SIG, Sauer P. 365 edition, widely recognized as one of the nation's absolute favorite pocket guns. Absolutely. Honestly, judging by the recording, we are looking at a miniaturized, subcompact, self-loading handgun. Look, clearly the visual fidelity isn't exactly broadcast quality here, yet based solely on the weapon's silhouette. My absolute immediate gut reaction points straight to a SIG Sauer P 365. Listen, I actually own a few of these firearms myself, and the handle shape feels virtually identical. You can find them absolutely anywhere. From local sporting goods aisles to massive retail chains and personal handoffs, that carrying case exposes everything. According to Andrew McCabe, who previously served as the absolute second-in-command at the Bureau, he stated flatly that anyone with genuine tactical or police experience would never wear their weapon rigged like this guy did. The rig was dangling right dead center on his waistline, resting awkwardly against his lower pelvis. That angle completely blocks a smooth, strong-side weapon retrieval. It totally rules out quick protection, clearly proving this individual lacked any real-world combat practice with the firearm. A seasoned soldier or street cop would instantly recognize that carrying method as a complete amateur move. McCabe left zero room for doubt, while veteran federal investigator Steve Moore caught another glaring error. He called the mismatched gear downright laughable, noting how a tiny handgun meant for deep concealment was totally out of place. Instead of slipping the pocket-sized weapon into a coat, the attacker stuffed it into a massive rig built for a heavy wheel gun. Those two pieces of gear simply clash, proving the wearer had absolutely no clue about proper firearm handling. Johnny Grusing took the analysis a step deeper, noticing those heavy winter mitts would totally ruin any chance of firing accurately. Let that truly sink in. Heavy fabric completely prevents you from slipping a digit into the firing mechanism, let alone holding the metal frame securely. By trying to keep his fingerprints hidden, the intruder accidentally rendered his own firearm completely useless. Grusing suspects the piece was nothing more than stage dressing, rather than a genuine tool for physical harm. It served purely as visual intimidation to control an 84-year-old victim, faking a lethal danger that did not actually exist. You only have to flash the metal to strike fear into someone, regardless of whether you can actually pull the trigger. Assuming the firearm was just a bluff, we are left staring at a much more terrifying puzzle. How did he actually control her? What specific leverage convinced Nancy Guthrie to unbolt her entryway and walk out into the blackness at 2 in the morning? Johnny Grusing feels incredibly confident he solved it, pointing away from the pistol and directly toward a pre-existing relationship. Allow me to formally introduce Johnny Grusing. His insight forms the entire foundation of our investigation today, and grasping his elite background is crucial before breaking down the evidence. After devoting 25 years to the Denver Federal Bureau, he spent 13 of them running their psychological profiling team. That elite federal department specializes in decoding the twisted mindsets driving the worst kinds of criminals. They dig past the raw actions to uncover underlying motives, mapping out exactly how these predators justify their horrific choices. They study exactly how suspects react under intense external pressure. He tackled everything from murders and abductions to ancient mysteries that sat rotting in storage while grieving relatives begged for closure. He additionally penned a deep dive into Scott Kimball called The Devil I Knew, exposing the methods of a prolific murderer. That horrific saga highlighted the peril of trusting the wrong neighbor, eventually leading to one of the biggest detective wins of our generation. He helped capture the notorious Golden State Killer, Joseph James D'Angelo spent decades inflicting pure terror and violence across the entire West Coast, hiding effortlessly among the very people he victimized. The monster slipped through the cracks until most detectives completely lost hope. Refusing to throw in the towel, Grusing's unit pioneered a groundbreaking technique known as advanced forensic ancestry tracing. By mapping out vast bloodline networks from microscopic genetic material, they successfully hunted the phantom down. Delivering long overdue justice to shattered families is his specialty, which ties directly into the nightmare we are discussing today. That exact same cutting-edge science, forensic family tree analysis, has re-entered the spotlight. Scientists at a private Florida facility are actively running those tests on the blended biological samples pulled straight from Nancy Guthrie's yard. The very technique that broke a decades-old mystery is currently zeroing in on the shadowy figure from that front step. Grusing never takes blind shots in the dark or chases camera time during an abduction hunt. He surgically dissects human actions. He strictly analyzes the raw physical traces. By analyzing stress responses and body language, he builds airtight profiles that have successfully put countless monsters behind bars. After reviewing the footage, Grusing immediately noticed an unexpected hiccup occurred out on that deck, derailing the entire operation. What started out as a silent extraction completely fell apart, devolving into total chaos within seconds. Familiarity became her death sentence, a fatal realization that anchors Grusing's entire behavioral hypothesis. Detailing the timeline to Fox News Digital, the expert explained how a masked intruder approached Nancy Guthrie's residence during the pre-dawn darkness on the 1st of February. Hiding from the lens wasn't just about avoiding surveillance footage. Instead, this calculated concealment served a deeply specific psychological purpose. The intruder stayed out of sight deliberately, ensuring the homeowner wouldn't instantly spot a disguised stranger and react with sheer terror. Instead, she'd only catch a fleeting glimpse, just a shadowy outline suggesting a legitimate visitor, creating an illusion of normalcy that would linger for that briefest microsecond before sheer terror finally took hold. The profiler presented a remarkably sharp question, one that demands your absolute, undivided attention. Without sound recordings available, might this individual be pounding aggressively on the woodwork or repeatedly triggering that smart camera chime? Perhaps the prowler desperately wanted her to open up, actively keeping his covered features perfectly hidden from a direct view, hoping her groggy state prompts her to twist the knob. This isn't mere speculation, but an actionable, heavily calculated tactical assessment. His entire scheme heavily relied on her approaching the entryway, demanding her unknowing, yet crucial, assistance. Success hinged on a bewildered woman deciding at 2 o'clock in the morning to undo the deadbolt and move closer to an unknown midnight caller. The former agent suspects she actually complied, walking straight toward her front porch. He theorizes the victim unlatched it, which is exactly when everything completely fell apart. At 2 o'clock, under the dim glow of the entryway fixtures, an entirely unexpected variable suddenly disrupted the attacker's perfectly orchestrated plot. Perhaps his facial covering shifted marginally, or maybe the architectural shadows and overhead bulbs unexpectedly illuminated his features in a completely unintended manner. Alternatively, sight played no role. It could have been his unique vocal tone or a highly familiar conversational rhythm, or perhaps his distinct gestures, the unmistakable slope of his upper body, or his overall physical stature betrayed him. Our deeply wired instincts don't need a perfectly clear facial view to spot an acquaintance. Our bodies intuitively process 100 microscopic behavioral cues way before our waking minds ever rationally comprehend the situation. Familiar connections trigger identification through deeply mysterious, almost completely unexplainable psychological pathways. Scientific studies constantly prove we pinpoint close acquaintances using their gait, body language, and vocal cords just as frequently as their actual facial structures. Longtime companions trigger a profound neurological response before your brain even attempts to actively process who is standing directly in front of you. You cannot control this reaction. It is purely anatomical. The investigator concludes the elderly homeowner's innate reflexes kicked in flawlessly, instantly revealing the true identity of her late-night caller. Simultaneously, the disguised figure completely realized his meticulous scheme was now fundamentally ruined. Secrecy, the absolute core of his mission, vanished instantly. violently altering the trajectory of every single event that quickly followed. Those crimson stains outside, the permanently deactivated heart monitor, and a beloved mother vanishing into thin air. Every subsequent tragedy stems from that split second of familiarity, elevating this concept far beyond a simple, educated guess. It serves as a professional psychological model constructed by a veteran witnessing how criminals spiral into sheer panic whenever their secret personas are suddenly exposed. Control evaporates instantly, transforming a deeply calculated plot into an utterly chaotic, fear-fueled catastrophe. Furthermore, the consequences of this psychological profile stretch way past the tragic events of that morning. If she knew her assailant, he belongs to her inner circle rather than being a random threat, a fact federal authorities clearly grasp alongside those extortion letters. The former profiler tackled the extortion aspect head-on, an incredibly vital detail that bolsters his familiarity hypothesis through a drastically separate lens. Bizarrely, these financial demands were exclusively forwarded to various prominent journalistic organizations. Gossip hubs got complex digital coin requests, while competing newsrooms acquired virtually identical intimidating messages. However, one glaring irregularity forced detectives to completely pause their efforts right from the jump. Zero extortion threats or private messages ever reached the victim's actual relatives. You really need to ponder that anomaly. When you abduct an 84-year-old senior citizen purely for cash, especially while her child remains a famous television broadcaster boasting millions of viewers, you absolutely wouldn't email a trashy celebrity tabloid. Instead, you'd contact her famous daughter directly, reaching out exclusively to her immediate household. Kidnappers provide photographic evidence of survival while opening private dialogues, which is the standard protocol for illicit hostage negotiations. Virtually all historically documented domestic extortion plots utilize this exact foundational blueprint. Yet this particular tragedy completely deviated. The expert reached a blunt verdict: these financial threats lack authenticity, functioning instead as an entirely different type of manipulation entirely. Likely an elaborate smokescreen designed to fabricate a fake storyline, intentionally steering detectives miles away from the perpetrator's actual hidden agenda. If money wasn't the real goal, what truly was? The profiler cautiously suggested a deep-seated grudge, heavily emphasizing his reliance on readily available media reports rather than classified federal intelligence. Yet, the blueprint he laid out left absolutely zero room for doubt. We are talking about an enemy harboring a vicious grudge against Nancy Guthrie directly, totally unfazed by Savannah's stardom or the family's overall celebrity status. A deeply intimate vendetta simmering until it boiled over, ultimately pushing a heavily armed assailant right onto her porch in the dead of night. During a sit-down conversation with the Daily Mail, Sheriff Chris Nano dropped a massive clue that I simply cannot shake. His exact words were, "We are really hung up on the motive here. You know, were they just chasing a payday? Sure, there was that single ransom note. But was cash the true goal? Or was this pure retaliation? The top cop of Puma County throwing around a term like retaliation on record implies this was no random brainwave. That is a leader intentionally broadcasting the exact angle his detectives have been obsessing over behind closed doors. He picked his phrasing carefully and purposely, which becomes glaringly obvious when compared against Grusing's psychological profile. Once you merge a private grudge with calculated retaliation into one cohesive narrative arc, the resulting image shatters the illusion of a highly trained abduction crew botching a job. It reveals a deeply intimate, laser-focused hit that makes perfect sense once the porch dweller is unmasked, involving the FBI, armories, and 18 suspects. At this juncture, psychological guesswork takes a backseat to hard, undeniable police work. Halfway through February, about 2.5 weeks deep, a Tucson firearms dealer dropped a bombshell that completely flipped the true crime world's perspective. The man stepping into the spotlight was Philip Martin. Running Armor Bearer Arms down in Tucson, he spilled details to Fox News Digital that finally cemented the wild rumors everyone was whispering about. Federal agents are not exactly drowning in a bottomless pool of potential culprits. They possess a very precise registry. I just needed to scan my logs for anyone matching his sheet, roughly 20 individuals or fewer, to see who snagged a weapon within the past 12 months. Martin recalled a Fed strolling into his shop between February 10th and 12th, holding 3 sheets packed with faces and aliases for 18 to 24 targets. The detective tasked Martin with cross-referencing his entire sales database against every single identity provided. The ultimate goal was to discover if any of those men had acquired a weapon there over the previous year. 3 sheets containing 18 to 24 profiles paired with mugshots prompted Martin to punch every surname into his computer. Not a single person from the batch had ever shopped at Armor Bearer Arms. However, while chatting with Cole News, Martin revealed a detail that vastly outweighs the negative search results. He noted the headshots bore an uncanny resemblance to the facial traits caught on the ring cam, far beyond a mere passing similarity. Even prior to searching, I stared at the sheets thinking I didn't recognize a soul. Yet I figured I should still try, he explained. Anything to help out a local Tucson resident who got snatched. Specifically, this Nancy Guthrie woman who was taken. Absolutely. I will verify if these alleged abductors shopped here, though they hadn't, leaving the agent empty-handed. He explicitly stated that the distinct beards and overall vibes of those men mirrored the disguised intruder caught outside. This massive clue reveals exactly how the feds built their registry and what their current playbook entails, proving they aren't just spamming merchants with random suspects. Authorities are distributing a hand-picked catalog of people sporting physical traits that flawlessly match the captured security video. Brian Entin from News Nation, boasting deeper boots-on-the-ground access to the probe than virtually any rival reporter out there, revealed that federal operatives hit up numerous armories throughout the Tucson region armed with identical documents. They went far beyond Armor Bearer Arms, executing a highly calculated sweep across dozens of merchants. NBC News subsequently dropped an exclusive, confirming another dealer saw a 3 to 4 page dossier filled with snapshots of younger to middle-aged guys. One insider noted the pictures looked exactly like booking photos, highlighting known criminals locked inside searchable government databases. You absolutely do not hunt a ghost using these methods. This is hardly the protocol for detectives operating without a solid hypothesis or viable breadcrumbs. Nobody parades targeted headshots into selected businesses with pinpoint questions without already knowing precisely who they want to catch. Federal agents possess real identities, matched with clear portraits, and are aggressively auditing their paper trails. They are convinced the man who terrorized Nancy Guthrie's porch is on that sheet, leading us straight into the Walmart connection and how those mugshots were sourced. Inside Edition broke the news that authorities pulled a significant chunk of those identities and pictures straight from Walmart's sales logs. Everything loops right back around to the single most undeniable piece of evidence in the entire ordeal, the knapsack. The assailant's 25-liter black rucksack turned out to be an Ozark Trail hiking bag, exclusively retailed through Walmart locations. Sheriff Nanos dropped a bombshell right away. That specific gear was the absolute only piece of evidence tied directly to one single store. All the other stuff, the coat, the slacks, the boots, could be from anywhere. But that rucksack traced back to just one store, and Walmart logs everything. They track every single purchase. They also monitor every inch of their aisles with cameras. If the creep paid for that bag with plastic, there's a hard record with his name glued to it. Even if he paid with paper money, there is still a massive chance that security lenses caught his face at the register to compare against the porch camera. Detectives partnered right up with corporate bosses to chase down these clues. We have that on record. That level of intense teamwork between the feds and a massive national chain takes real time to slowly build, but it yields ironclad proof. You see the trap now. The bag points directly to the big box store. The store provides the receipts. Those receipts reveal names. Those names bring up faces. And those faces go to the local firearm shops. Dealers then verify if any of those guys bought a piece that matches the one in the video clip. It is incredibly calculated. It takes extreme patience. This is definitely not a dead-end case. This is a team slowly piecing together a puzzle step by step because they already know the final outcome. They hold back massive secrets. They had a massive hunch stepping into that weapons shop. They felt it when they sat down with store managers. They knew exactly what they were doing, flashing 3 sheets of mugshots at gunsmiths all over town. We are not asking if they have a prime suspect in mind. We are wondering how fast they will lock him up. Let us talk about Florida. The biology changes it. The receipt tracking and the massive firearm search make up one solid path. But the biological clues open a completely different door. Both of these paths are crashing into the exact same suspect. Cops lifted genetics off Nancy's lawn that simply do not match her friends. Her entire family is now cleared. Her loved ones played ball, willingly gave their mouth swabs, and were entirely ruled out. That strange genetic material found right by the bloody porch was shipped off to a private lab in Florida. The head sheriff confirmed it is a mixture. Testing it is incredibly tough work. Sometimes genetic profiles get jumbled up together. This specific stain had multiple donors mixed in. Experts have to untangle the messy web because multiple people left their trace behind. Federal databases struggle with messy samples like that. But the feds have other tricks nowadays. Just listen to geneticist C.C. Moore. She is no mere television pundit. She literally invented modern ancestry tracking for complex crimes, personally helping close well over 1,000 cold cases across the country. She warned the national press, "If I took that woman, I would be absolutely terrified right now, because family tree tracking is going to nail him. If I were the kidnapper, I would be sweating bullets, because ancestry tracking guarantees his absolute downfall." She meant business. No doubts at all. Just hard facts. She clearly broke down the clock. If the guy has deep American roots, matching him through online family trees takes just minutes, maybe a few hours tops. The further back his bloodline goes, the more matches pop up online, making his ultimate capture almost instantaneous. This exact science caught the infamous California prowler. That brutal monster dodged the cops for literally decades. He thought he beat the system. He failed. His spit built a family web that brought the feds straight to his door. Science ignores how sneaky you tried to be. It completely ignores the passage of time. It laughs at criminals who think they are invisible. If a distant cousin spit into a tube for a heritage site, you are completely busted. A retired federal boss broke down the brilliant forensic strategy. Detectives already scrubbed the profiles of every single person who actually belonged there. All that is left is the strange stuff. And even without a direct federal hit, it sparks an ancestry hunt that traces straight through generations right to one guilty man. The working theory suggests she recognized her attacker. The biology proves the feds are locking in the exact identity of the monster. These are not just two separate ideas. They are two roads meeting at the same intersection. The retail store suspects. The mugshots making the rounds at firearm dealers. The genetic swabs out east waiting for a cousin match. The behavioral profile screaming that the culprit is a close acquaintance. Every single clue in this massive hunt leads right back to the exact same tight circle. The walls are rapidly closing in on the suspect. And seasoned investigator Johnny Grew insists the final picture is finally coming into sharp focus. Let us quickly break down this fascinating behavioral profile before tackling the ultimate question that this entire deep dive has been building toward. I firmly believe these psychological clues are far more compelling than even the most eagle-eyed viewers have truly realized. Every single choice this culprit made weaves a clear narrative about his initial expectations and his ultimate catastrophic failures. The man showed absolutely zero fear of detection while strolling up to that residence. Such arrogant body language suggests he fully expected Nancy Guthrie to willingly unlatch her front door for him despite the late hour. He was clearly a familiar face or expected guest, boldly arriving without sophisticated gear to jam the security feeds. Using nearby bushes as a makeshift disguise screams of a poorly rehearsed scheme that completely fell apart upon hitting a minor snag. This amateur clearly never practiced his deadly operation under realistic, high-pressure field conditions, driven entirely by reckless fantasy rather than actual grit. He brandished a badly held decoy firearm, stuffed into the wrong-sized holster. The gun was rendered useless by the thick gloves he wore to hide genetic tracks. That pistol was nothing more than a theatrical prop meant strictly for intimidation rather than inflicting actual lethal harm. Bringing a fake weapon proves he anticipated a completely calm conversation rather than a chaotic struggle for his survival. Yet the gruesome crimson stains on the front steps prove things quickly turned violently out of control. The deadly clash unfolded completely outdoors on the patio, totally exposed to the world just inches away from the public road. Sheriff Nanos officially confirmed that genetic testing matched the victim's blood trailing from the steps straight down the concrete driveway. That specific outdoor perimeter was the exact battleground where his supposedly flawless plot totally unraveled. Combining these gruesome forensic clues with Gruing's familiarity theory and the attacker's psychological tells suddenly paints an unmistakably clear and damning portrait. The entire criminal scheme shattered into pieces the exact second Nancy's natural survival instincts flawlessly kicked into high gear. Former federal agent Lance Leang shared a fascinating perspective regarding the sudden police quiet period during a March broadcast on national television. The family desperately hopes, and I fully agree, that the detectives' tight lips mean they are currently hunting down a major lead. The homicide detectives simply need a little more time to dig deeper. Everyone is praying this absolute quiet signifies a massive breakthrough that just requires a bit more relentless digging. Ex-federal investigator Maureen O'Connell remains one of the absolute most brilliant analytical minds dissecting this harrowing mystery. Her incredible insights shared during the Megyn Kelly broadcast have been echoing endlessly inside my head ever since I heard them. She confidently stated that law enforcement is sitting on a mountain of hidden facts and actively tracking a major breakthrough. The police definitely have a massive target in their sights, but might be struggling to gather enough concrete forensic evidence to make a successful arrest. Detectives are actively hunting a huge lead while fighting an incredibly uphill battle to solidify their legal case against the suspect. Pinpointing the culprit was the easy part, but locking down a rock-solid conviction is an entirely different beast altogether. This case teaches a chilling but necessary truth. Danger does not always come from strangers, it often comes from familiarity, the person we feel safe opening the door to, the voice we recognize, the presence that seems harmless. These can be the very things that lower our guard at the worst possible moment. Trust is powerful, but it must be paired with awareness. It also reveals how illusion can be used as a weapon. A fake sense of control, a staged appearance. Even a non-functional threat, sometimes fear alone, is enough to manipulate a situation. This reminds us that perception can be just as dangerous as reality, especially when someone understands how to exploit it. Another powerful lesson is patience in the pursuit of truth. Justice is not always immediate. Behind the silence of investigators is often relentless work connecting data, analyzing behavior, and building a case strong enough to stand in court. What looks like delay is often precision. Most importantly, this story is about human connection. Every victim is someone's family, someone deeply loved. Staying aware, checking in on vulnerable people, and speaking up when something feels wrong can make all the difference. In a world where evil can hide behind familiarity, awareness becomes our strongest defense.